to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. I'm so excited for this video because I get to tell you about a brand new yarn added to the Red Heart Super Saver line. It is Red Heart Fair Isle. This is a great way for you to do that wonderful Fair Isle look that you might love, but you're not sure how to get. What's neat is the Fair Isle yarn has been dyed in such a way that as you work up your project, the yarn itself gives you the Fair Isle look. In this video, we are going to learn to make the Fair Isle crochet scarf. This is a free pattern available over on redheart.com. It requires 2 skeins of Red Heart Super Saver Fair Isle in any of the shades that you choose to use. It uses a size I or a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and you will need a good pair of scissors and an awesome bent tip tapestry needle. Now, as I mentioned, this is a brand new yarn by Red Heart, and it is available in stores, but if you want to make sure that you can get your little hands on it, you're going to want to order it directly from redheart.com. I've put a link to the actual yarn itself and the free pattern in the video description box right down there below. And while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say. Grab your yarn, grab your pattern, join me back here. I'm going to show you how to make this super simple Fair Isle crochet scarf. Seriously, it's very easy, perfect for the beginner crocheter out there, and those of you who might want to just try out a simple pattern using the Super Saver Fair Isle. Okay, I'm excited for this. Let's jump in and learn how to make this really easy scarf. For this pattern, I am going to use the colorway Derby Fair Isle. Derby Fair Isle. That's the colorway I'm using. And because this is a Red Heart Super Saver, it is a center pull skein. Super easy. Find your center bit and just pull it out. So I am going ahead and pull out a section here. And we start off with a slip knot. Place the tail of a yarn in your hand. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger and middle finger. When you come back up, cross over. Now turn your hand. Go ahead. You could take your hook, go underneath the first loop and grab the second loop and bring it up. Take your fingers out and pull. Now you have this kind of big loop here. If you just separate those 2 ends of the yarn, it will tighten up on your hook and you have a slip knot. Pretty easy, right? So far, so good. What you want to do now is create 24 chains. Now, this pattern is written by Sarah K. Hartman, and it's really easy, and it's a great pattern to learn how to crochet, but it's also a great pattern to use for this new Super Saver Fair Isle because it allows the actual color changes to land where they're supposed to. So to create 24 chains, you're going to hold your yarn and your hook, and we will take our hook and going around the yarn just like so. We will grab that yarn and pull it through that slip knot that we created. Now, you do not want to pull your yarn extra tight at this point. We want that stitch we just created to maintain the same size that it was when it was on this portion of the hook. So that would count as 1 chain. You never count the loop on your hook as a chain. So when that slip knot was on our hook, it did not count. But now that we have worked through it, it does count. So that would be 1, and then you just repeat this process. Rotate around and pull through. That's 2, 3, 4. I'm going to pause here because I want you to see something. Can you see that I'm getting a really nice flat surface here with sections that look like V's? What I want to do is to make sure that my beginning chain here doesn't turn on me, doesn't twist and turn. I take the pad of my thumb and I rest it right there on those V's that we're looking at. I just rest it and I move it up with my hook about every 3rd or 4th stitch. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and see how I'm keeping everything straight? I move the pad of my thumb up. 8, 9, 10, move the pad of my thumb up. 11, 12, 13, 14. I'm going to give myself some more yarn, and by moving my thumb up with the chain itself, it allows the chain to keep that straight section here. See how none of my chains are twisted? It just keeps it nice and straight, and you can use this for anything. I am going to go ahead and finish my 24 chains. You go ahead and do the same. Once you've reached 24 chains, this is a good point to go back and go ahead and recount your chains just to make sure. If you've been using the pad of your thumb along the top edge of your chains, like before, you'll see that you have a nice, clean, crisp edge. And all of those little V's that I pointed out before are just all sitting right there for you. So all you have to do to count your stitches, I'm going to grab this tapestry needle just to point out. Can you see that V right there? So this V right here, that's one stitch. That V right there, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth. So if you count your V's, that's a great way for you to be able to count your chains. The next part of this scarf is really easy, and this is the stitch you will use for the entire scarf. We are going to put a half double crochet in the third chain from our hook. So we want to count 1, 2, 3. And in this third chain, we want to put a half double crochet. To do that, you will put your yarn over your hook, put your hook directly into that chain, and it doesn't matter if you go in to the back loop, the bottom loop, the top loop, whatever loop you want, just stick your hook in there. This is what we're going to do here at the start. Then you yarn over, pull up a loop, and you have what looks like 3 loops on your hook. You will yarn over, draw through 2 loops, and that last one. See that? You draw through all 3 loops. That is a half double crochet. We're going to do that in every chain all the way down this row. And again, we want to make sure that we keep this chain nice and straight. So because we used the pad of our thumb to keep those straight at the start, it's going to make it easier here from here on out. Let's make some more half doubles. So you start off by yarning over your hook. Go into the next stitch, yarn over your hook, come through that stitch, so it looks like you have 3 on your hook, yarn over, draw through all 3. Yarn over your hook, go into the next stitch, yarn over your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over your hook, draw through 3. Yarn over your hook, go into the next stitch, yarn over your hook, pull up a loop, yarn over your hook, draw through all 3. When you get to the end of this row, you will have a total of 22 half double crochets. All right, I just finished my last half double crochet, and I can see here I have a nice beautiful row of half double crochets. I could go back at this point and count each one of those half doubles and make sure I have 22, which I do. So the next part of the instructions, we are going to go ahead and turn our work. So you just turn your work, rotate it so that the work itself is going away from your hook. And now you will chain 2. So we'll chain 1 and chain 2. And you'll notice in the instructions, it said that this chain 2 counts as a half double crochet now and throughout. That's very important for you to make note of, because what it means is this chain 2 right here is going to represent a stitch that goes into that place right there. So you want to make sure you do not accidentally put a stitch into that stitch right there, because this chain 2 represents the stitch that would be placed right there. So what you will do is you will half double crochet in each of the next stitches all the way down. So we will skip this one and coming over here working through both of the V's, so working through both the back loop and the front loop. Okay, so there's like this gap right there. Can you see that gap? I'm going to put my hook right through that. So that is when you can see you have both loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull up a loop, and you have 3 on your hook again. Yarn over, draw through all 3. Yarn over your hook, go into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through all 3. Yarn over, go to the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through all 3. You will do this all the way to the end of the row, and you will have 22 half double crochets again, but remember that that first chain 2 counts as a half double crochet. So when you're counting your half doubles, you want to make sure that you're counting that in your total. As I'm coming up to the end of my work here, I want to make sure I work all the way down here to the edge, so that way my my edge itself is nice and clean and crisp. Once I get to the end of my row, I will go ahead, turn my work, and repeat row 2. So I chain 2, and remember, I will not put a stitch into this one because this chain 2 represents that stitch that would normally go there. I will yarn over my hook, go into the next stitch, and complete my half double crochet. And I will do this all the way to the end of the row. I want to get to the end of this row so I can show you what the end will look like, so that way you are working into the correct stitch at the very end. Then I am going to give you a little tip that will be very helpful, especially to those of you who are beginners and really have trouble knowing what the last stitch is of your row. I'm going to show you how to use stitch markers to make sure that your edges are nice and clean and crisp. Okay, I'm coming up to the end of my row, and like many of you, I get really lost to find what the last stitch is I'm supposed to work into. So I could pause at this point, come back here and count to see how many stitches I have. So I have 2, remember you count this one, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, and I need to have 22. So I need to fit 2 more stitches over here. So I know that I need to put 1 stitch right here, okay, so it would be in that stitch right there. And then I need to fit 1 more, which makes sense because that would work into my turning chain right there, my 2 stitches that count as my half double crochet. When you work into these 2 stitches, you have a choice. You can actually work into the big space there, okay? You can work into that space, but what that does is creates a hole on the edge of your work. What I like to do is, just like when we worked into the chains at the very start, I like to work into the actual chains that we made there. So I would go into the second chain, put my hook in, and create my half double crochet directly through that second chain. Now, if I want to go on and really make sure that I know exactly where my stitch needs to go without any guesswork, and this is really helpful for both of you out there who might be experienced crocheters or very beginner crocheters. Even I still use stitch markers. That's right, stitch markers. Stitch markers are really useful to point out where the beginning of your row is on either side of an object. I find them really helpful. I use them quite a bit, and when I teach beginner crochet in my local yarn store or at Stitches Expos, I always show them how to use stitch markers. So that's what I want to show you now. I'm going to use 2 stitch markers that I actually made, and I will put a link to how you can make these stitch markers right there in that little I button. So if you want to make some fun decorative stitch markers, you absolutely could do that. Or you could always go to the store and purchase these little removable stitch markers also. They work as well. But sometimes, you know, you just like to have a little bling in your work. This is how you're going to use them. Are you ready? At the end of your work, we'll go ahead, we will turn. We will chain 2, and this is where we want to add our stitch marker. The reason we want to add our stitch marker at this point is because our chain 2 actually counts as a stitch. So the second chain of this chain 2 is the top of our stitch. That's where we want to put our last stitch on the next row. So you just grab the stitch marker, and we will attach it to the chain that's behind the loop on our hook. So I just have it dangling there directly on that chain. And what will happen is when I come back in this direction and I'm like, okay, where's the last stitch I work into? I will know what stitch it is because it's already marked. Once that's marked, I just ignore it. Like, I don't need to do anything else. Make sure I skip that first stitch because that's the way the designer wrote this pattern. And we will put half double crochets in every stitch all the way to the end. Now, because there's a right side and a wrong side, there is an end to 2 different edges, we are going to have 2 stitch markers in total used on this project. We will have a stitch marker at either end of this scarf. So we will have a stitch marker at the start of the row, every row, okay? But we will move that stitch marker up. Let me show you what I mean. When I get to the end here, I didn't add a stitch marker down here yet. So once again, you'll see that I would be like, okay, where's the last stitch? Well, I know that I have to put one right here. And I also know I have to put one in the top of those two turning chains. So that turning chain right there. So I did my half double. Okay. So there's my start stitch marker at the start. I would turn my work, chain 2, and this is where I would add my other stitch marker. Okay, I want to add it at the start of this edge. So I grab my stitch marker, put it in the second chain, right? Not the one that's on our hook, the one below it, and then I ignore it. I go down to the other edge. Go ahead and work my half double crochets all to the other edge. And what you're going to notice is when I get down there, the first stitch marker I put in place is down there waiting for me, and it's going to tell me exactly where my last stitch of the row is. And it's going to be really helpful. I know some of you might not need this little tip, which is totally fine, but there are some of you out there that maybe have always struggled with your edges being a little bit off, coming in, going out. This is a great way just to make sure that your edges are nice and straight, which is perfect for a scarf because you don't want your scarf to be all wavy. So I'm here almost to the very end. Sorry, my markers are hitting the table a little bit. And I could be like, oh, okay, so there's where my last stitch needs to go. So I have one stitch right here. And now I know where that marker is. I can put my hook right there where the marker is and complete my half double crochet. Turn my work, chain 2, and move my marker up. So I take it out of that one, move it up, put it into that one, right? And I carry on just like before. And when I get to the other end, that's when I'll have my other marker down there waiting. Pretty cool, right? It's really easy. It's super simple to do. And you don't have to just do this on scarves. You can do this on blankets. You can do this on garments. You can do this on hats. Anything that you need to make sure that you know where that last stitch is, you can use stitch markers. Okay, now that you know how to do the half double crochet, how to use stitch markers to make sure your edges are nice and clean, you know how to complete this scarf. So all you will do is work your scarf up to the measurement as listed in the pattern. There will come a point in time where you have to add a new ball of yarn. So what I want to do next is show you how to add that new ball of yarn so that way you're aware of how to do it. When you add a new ball of yarn, you want to make sure you do it at the end or the beginning of a row. You don't want to add yarn in the middle of your project because it just is better to add it at the edges. So meaning if you run out of yarn maybe mid-row, rip out those stitches until you get back to the beginning and change colors at that point. We're going to pretend that I need to add a new ball of yarn right now. So I'm on the last stitch, so I would yarn over, go into that last stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and all of this is done with the yarn that I'm still working with. But what I want to do now is I want to grab whatever yarn I'm changing to, and on my final yarn over to draw through all of these stitches, I will do that with my new yarn. So I'm going to use a different yarn just so you guys can see what I'm adding here. So I've just grabbed a teal yarn. And what I did is you can see I put the tail like right up next to the working yarn that I was working with. And I will just yarn over with the new yarn and pull that yarn over with the new yarn through all those stitches. What that does is it allows the old yarn to finish off. The new yarn is attached. We turn our work, chain 2, move our stitch marker up if you're using a stitch marker. It's hard to hold everything at the same time. Move my stitch marker up, and then carry on just with my new yarn. The tails of the old yarn and the new yarn you attach, so these two sections here, you could go back and weave in your tails later on. I'll show you how to do that as well. So let me go ahead. I will just snip this off. Let's just pretend that was working there, and I will go ahead and I will just snip this off as if it ran out of yarn. All right, so let's say you're at the end of your project. You're like, okay, cool. I have all these tails. I want to make sure I weave them in nicely and they don't come undone, because that is like the worst thing ever, especially if you're wearing it and you made it and you're showing it off, then all of a sudden these tails are poking out, or if you gave it as a gift and all of a sudden the tails start poking out, like that's just no fun. So what you want to do is grab a bent tip tapestry needle. These things are absolutely fantastic. I love them. You will thread your bent tip tapestry needle with the tail of your yarn. Okay, so I just put it in there. And what I want to do is I want to take my yarn and I'm going to go in this motion. I'm going to cross the stitches. I want to make sure I don't pull too tight. And then I'm going to come back. So see how I have like a little V right there? I'm going to skip over that first one, go into the second and come back. All right, so I just went east and west. Now, what I like to do is I would go east or west one more time, okay? So I would jump over this first and come back. All right, so what that has done, I've woven it in a couple times. What I can do now is I could go north and south, but because we're working with yarn that has different colors, I'm actually just going to go back one more time. And this time as I'm coming back, I want to try and split through the yarn of the tail yarn that I've already come through, just so that it kind of grabs at it. The reason I'm going back one more time is I like to snip my tails where they're down here at this edge. I don't like slipping my tails over here because I feel like they poke out. But if I slip it down there, it's not coming undone. Look at that. It's nice and secured in. And I could do the same thing with this bit of tail. Now, obviously, I'm going to mention it one more time because I know some of you will get confused by this. I used a different yarn altogether just to show you how to change colors. You would want to make sure that you use the same yarn colorway and dye lot for your scarf, and you would just weave in your ends. Once you finish the body of the scarf and woven all of your tails, the last bit is just adding some fringe, which is really simple and super on trend, but maybe you've never added fringe before. It is so incredibly easy. Let me show you how to do that next. When you're making fringe, the first thing you need to do is cut the appropriate number of lengths of yarn. So we are going to have 10-inch lengths of yarn, and we need a total of 18 groups of 5, meaning we need 90 10-inch lengths of yarn. So all I'm doing right here is, because I'm just going to show you how to do this first one, is I am just guesstimating 10 inches here. Once you have your lengths of yarn, go ahead and fold them in half. This halfway point right up here, this is the part that will be up against the scarf, okay? And we want to make sure that all of the little fold overs are all on the same side. So pick which side you want that side to be. Once you have that side chosen, go ahead and make sure it's facing you. Once it's facing you, we want to pick the midway point here for the start one. So I'm going to say that that's about midway. And I'm going to put my hook directly into the midway point. I will then grab the center of my folded fringe here, and I am going to pull that through that stitch. Okay? So I've pulled it through the stitch. Now that I've pulled it through, I open up this center midway point, and using my fingers, I can grab the tail and pull that through. And I'm just giving it a pull. It's just tightening up the center bit, the center section that I pulled through. Right there. And I've added fringe, okay? Once you've added the fringe to the center portion of the scarf, you will then apply the fringe evenly spaced out on either side of that center. Once you've done that, you have a really great scarf. Now, because I don't have a finished scarf here with me, we're going to take a look at the pattern once again, and let's take a look at what you should be having here. Is you can see right here that the yarn itself gives the really cool look of a really simple Fair Isle. Using Super Saver Fair Isle is a really great way for you to get a pretty neat look using just one colorway of yarn. Of course, it's not going to look like absolute traditional Fair Isle, but this is one of those cheater methods that's really great when you're in a pinch. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video and you will share it with your friends. If this is the first time you've ever crocheted a scarf, hopefully I helped you out, and those stitch markers will really be helpful. So go ahead and make your own, make some little bling for yourself also. Hope you will grab some Red Heart Super Saver Fair Isle yarn of your own and enjoy making projects with this wonderful yarn. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarn, and good luck. Hey, don't leave yet. I'm sure there are other videos here that you will enjoy. Go ahead and check out some of my knitting and crochet videos as well as some of my crafting videos. You will love them, I promise. If you hit subscribe, you'll be up to date whenever there's a new video released. And as my kids say, don't forget to smash that like button. Bye. Everything you need to know about knitting or crochet can be found right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Learn with Marley Bird. Visit youtube.com/Marley Bird.